The world knows Mohamed Salah as the Egyptian king, a man who scored his way into Liverpool folklore, who turned a small village nobody could find on a map into a name chanted in stadiums across Europe. Calm, humble, almost unreadable, even in his greatest triumphs. But in the summer of 2026, that same unreadable king stood in front of a camera and admitted something that broke through 9 years of carefully guarded composure. There was a boyhood spent commuting hours just to touch a football, a shoulder injury that stole a Champions League final from him in front of the entire world, a national team heartbreak that seemed to repeat itself, tournament after tournament, year after year. And then, in his final moments as a Liverpool player, a confession that stunned even the people who thought they knew him best. I cried more than in my whole life. How does a man who built his entire public identity on control let the whole world watch him fall apart? If Mohamed Salah's journey has meant something to you, leave a like before we begin. This one's for him. Mohamed Salah Ghali was born on June 15, 1992, in Nagreg, a small agricultural village in Egypt's Garbia Governorate, roughly 2 hours outside Cairo. It was a place of narrow dirt roads, modest homes, and a community where football wasn't a luxury. It was one of the only escapes available. As a boy, Salah's talent was obvious almost immediately, but talent in Nagreg didn't come with convenient access to proper training. To chase his dream, a young Salah made a grueling daily commute, reportedly spending upward of 4 hours a day traveling to and from academy training in Cairo, often arriving home late at night only to wake up for school the next morning. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't guaranteed to lead anywhere, but it was the only path he had. His family supported the sacrifice, even as it pulled a young boy away from a normal childhood, long bus rides replacing playground afternoons, exhaustion replacing rest. Salah has spoken, in various interviews over the years, about how that village humility never left him, how Nagreg remained the emotional center of who he was, long after the world started calling him a king. Because before any trophy, before any transfer fee, there was simply a boy willing to sacrifice his childhood for 4 hours on a bus, just for the chance to play. Salah's rise was anything but a straight line to stardom. After breaking through with El Mokalun in the Egyptian Premier League, he earned a move to Swiss club Basel in 2012 and performed well enough to catch the attention of one of Europe's biggest clubs, Chelsea, who signed him in January 2014. It should have been the launching pad for a superstar career. Instead, it became one of the most painful chapters of his professional life. Under manager Jose Mourinho, Salah struggled for regular playing time, making only a handful of appearances before being loaned out, first to Fiorentina, then to Roma, as Chelsea effectively gave up on the player who would later become one of the most feared attackers on the planet. For a young Egyptian footballer trying to prove himself in Europe's most unforgiving league, being deemed surplus to requirements at a top club could have ended a career's momentum entirely. Instead, Salah rebuilt himself in Italy, first on loan, then in a permanent move to Roma, where he developed into one of Serie A's most dangerous forwards, finally proving that Chelsea's decision had been a mistake, not a verdict on his ability. By the time Liverpool came calling in the summer of 2017, Salah wasn't just talented anymore. He was hungry, proven, and absolutely ready for the moment that was about to change his life forever. The moment that defined Salah's Liverpool legacy wasn't just a single goal. It was a night that carried both euphoria and heartbreak in equal measure. May 26, 2018. Kiev, Ukraine. The UEFA Champions League final. Liverpool versus Real Madrid. Salah had just completed a sensational debut season at Anfield, scoring 44 goals in all competitions, a Premier League record-breaking campaign that had already crowned him the league's player of the season. Early in the final, tangled up with Real Madrid captain Sergio Ramos, Salah's shoulder dislocated in a challenge that instantly silenced the Liverpool section of the stadium. Visibly in pain, tears streaming down his face, Salah was forced off the pitch just 30 minutes into the biggest match of his career. Liverpool would go on to lose the final 3-1. Salah's tears that night weren't about a missed opportunity. They were about a moment stolen from him. A chance to perform on football's biggest stage, ended before it had truly begun. But rather than let that moment define him, Salah returned the very next season sharper, hungrier, and more determined. 1 year later, in 2019, Liverpool reached the Champions League final once again, and this time, Salah scored inside the second minute, helping deliver Liverpool their sixth European Cup. The kid from Nagreg who once commuted 4 hours a day for a chance to play had become a European champion. What followed was one of the most statistically dominant eras any Premier League forward has ever produced. Salah would go on to win the Premier League Golden Boot multiple times, sharing or outright claiming the award across several seasons, while helping Liverpool capture 2 Premier League titles, the Champions League, the FA Cup, and the League Cup during his 9-year spell at Anfield. He broke Steven Gerrard's Liverpool Premier League assist record. He became one of only a handful of players in Premier League history to reach 200 goals for a single club. Fans immortalized him in chants that echoed across Anfield week after week, a rare kind of adoration usually reserved for club legends who'd spent decades at one institution. But Salah's story was never just about Liverpool. As captain of the Egyptian national team, he carried the hopes of an entire nation onto the international stage, leading Egypt to the 2018 World Cup and to back-to-back Africa Cup of Nations finals in 2017 and 2021, agonizingly falling short both times. Off the pitch, Salah became one of football's most respected humanitarian figures, funding schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects in his home village of Nagreg, turning his personal success into tangible change for the community that raised him. For nearly a decade, Salah wasn't just a football star. He was a symbol of what discipline, humility, and quiet resilience could build, brick by brick, goal by goal. But even the steadiest kings eventually have to face their hardest goodbyes. Here's what the trophy celebrations rarely show. Behind Salah's remarkably consistent output on the pitch was a player who, according to multiple reports over the years, quietly managed the physical toll of playing an extraordinarily heavy schedule: club football, Champions League campaigns, and international duty with Egypt, often with minimal rest between them. There was also the recurring emotional weight of international heartbreak. Losing back-to-back AFCON finals with Egypt, then suffering a gut-wrenching World Cup qualification playoff defeat to Senegal in 2022, missing a crucial penalty in the process, took a visible toll. Teammates and former colleagues, including ex-Liverpool defender Dejan Lovren, publicly reached out to console him during that period, a rare public glimpse into just how much those losses weighed on him privately. There were also quieter tensions behind the scenes at Liverpool in his final seasons. Reports of a strained relationship with manager Arne Slot, including being dropped from the squad at points before returning following the Africa Cup of Nations. For a player used to being the guaranteed focal point of a team's attack, that kind of uncertainty represented an unfamiliar and difficult chapter. Salah, by his own admission, has never presented himself as an emotional person publicly. Reserved, measured, rarely one to let the cameras see beneath the surface. Which is exactly why what happened in May 2026 hit so differently. After 9 trophy-laden years, Mohamed Salah's time at Liverpool came to an end following the 2025-26 season, departing with a year still remaining on his contract, following what reports described as deteriorating relations with manager Arne Slot. On the final day of the Premier League season, Salah made what would be his last appearance at Anfield, coming on to assist in a 1-1 draw against Brentford that secured Liverpool's Champions League qualification. His outside-of-the-boot cross setting up the goal in a moment that felt fittingly poetic for a player defined by moments of brilliance. What followed was one of the most emotional farewells the club had seen in years. Salah received a guard of honor alongside longtime teammate Andy Robertson. He embraced fans along the touchline, his daughters by his side. And in his post-match interview with Sky Sports, the notoriously composed Egyptian let his guard down completely. "I think I cried more than in my whole life. I'm not really an emotional guy. We lived our youth here, sharing everything from the beginning to the end." He continued, reflecting on 9 years that had taken him from a rejected Chelsea prospect to a Liverpool legend. "I look back and wonder if I would have wanted more than I achieved. Not really. We won it all. We see the love from the fans, and this is the most important thing for me." For a man who had spent nearly a decade being football's most emotionally guarded superstar, it was a confession that stunned even his most devoted supporters. A reminder that behind the records and the trophies was simply a man saying goodbye to the only footballing home he'd truly known as an adult. Just weeks later, Salah's summer took another emotional turn. Leading Egypt at the 2026 World Cup, he helped the Pharaohs make history, advancing past the group stage for the first time and reaching the knockout rounds. In the round of 16 against Argentina, Egypt led 2-0 deep into the second half, on the verge of the biggest result in the nation's football history. Then Argentina staged a stunning comeback. A goal from Cristian Romero, brilliance from Lionel Messi, and a stoppage-time strike from Enzo Fernandez, ending Egypt's dream campaign 3-2. Salah, who had been influential throughout the match, gathered his devastated teammates afterward and delivered a message that echoed the same quiet resilience that had defined his entire career. "I am proud of you. You fought until the very end and showed the true spirit of Egypt. This is not the end, but the beginning of something even greater." Two heartbreaks, weeks apart. One a tearful goodbye to the club that made him a legend. The other, a public promise to a nation that still believed in him, even in defeat. Today, at 34 years old, Mohamed Salah finds himself in an unfamiliar position for the first time in nearly a decade, a free agent, without a club, taking time to decide what comes next. Reports have linked him with interest from Major League Soccer and clubs in the Saudi Pro League, though as of this writing, no decision has been made public. Salah is reportedly taking time to rest after a physically and emotionally demanding World Cup campaign before deciding on the next chapter of his career. Off the pitch, he remains devoted to his family, his wife Magi and their daughters, and to the village of Nagrig, where his humanitarian projects continue to reshape the community that raised him. This story matters right now because it captures something rare in modern football: a global superstar, at the very end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another, finally letting the world see the emotion he'd spent 9 years quietly containing. Salah was never just the calm, clinical finisher the cameras love to show. He was a man who cried on the biggest stage of his career in 2018, who cried again saying goodbye to the club that made him a legend in 2026, and who, through every heartbreak in between, kept choosing to show up anyway. He was a boy who spent 4 hours a day on buses just for a chance to touch a football. He became a king who Liverpool fans immortalized in chants, who Egypt trusted to carry an entire nation's football dream on his shoulders. But in the end, it wasn't a golden boot, a Champions League trophy, or a broken record that revealed who Mohamed Salah truly was. It was a quiet admission, spoken through tears, on the final day of a career-defining chapter. "I cried more than in my whole life." Because sometimes the strongest thing a king can do isn't staying composed until the very end. It's finally letting the crown down long enough to be human. If Mohamed Salah's story has moved you, share your favorite memory of him below. The world is still writing his next chapter.